Hey everyone, this is Brian from the Tennis IQ podcast. Josh and I hope that you are enjoying the content and discussions that we put out week after week. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to continue to produce quality episodes, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Currently, we have 3 tiers of support: the fan level at $3 per month, the supporter level at $7 per month, and the champion level at $20 per month. Benefits of joining the Tennis IQ podcast community include episode transcripts, participation in book club discussions, and access to monthly masterclasses with me and Josh. For more on these benefits of support, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Thank you so much. And now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Josh Berger.
And I'm Brian Lomax. And on today's episode of the Tennis IQ podcast, Josh and I will be speaking with Jan Mühlfeit. Jan is an executive coach and mental coach for athletes, as well as a best-selling author. He had a very successful 22-year career at Microsoft, in which he served in numerous executive positions, including as the chairman of Europe. Now, Jan works as a mental coach with Olympic athletes, as well as several young and promising Czech tennis players. In this very wide-ranging conversation that we have with Jan, we touch on things like purpose, acceptance, non-judgment, non-attachment, and we get into how Jan likes to work with his tennis players and his philosophy of coaching. We know that you are going to enjoy this very excellent conversation with Jan Mühlfeit.
Welcome, Jan. We are very excited to have Jan Mühlfeit joining us today. Jan Mühlfeit joining us today on the Tennis IQ.
Don't worry, it's perfect pronunciation.
Welcome, Jan. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we wanted to start off, with a little bit just about your background in terms of, how you got into the work that you do, and also a little bit about your interest and background with sports and with tennis.
Yeah. I was a professional tennis player till 20 years old. I played the junior league in, at that time, Czechoslovakia. Ivan Lendl was like 2 years older than me, or Miroslav Mečíš was 3 years younger than me. Those guys were there at that time. But then I decided to switch my career to the computer. So I studied computer engineering. I was still, playing tennis a little bit. I did many sports, but then at some point I joined Microsoft, where I spent 22 years working, even for 10 years, with people like Bill Gates, and Steve Ballmer. And at the end of my career, I was for 8 years Microsoft president for Europe. I left Microsoft 2014, and at that time I thought I would coach, executives and some companies and do some seminars, whatever. And then I started to coach. In fact, Olympic Games winner in modern pentathlon, David Svoboda, was my first, athlete. And then I was asked by the my dear friend, who is the chairman of Czech Olympic Games Committee, and also part of the International Olympic Games Committee. If I will do, Jiří will ask me if I can work with the other, athletes from the other, sports, and I started to do it. So I'm like the mental coach for the Czech Olympic top team and do many sports. And among others, I coach also Jiří Lehečka, that's the, senior tennis player in the senior category, the junior category. Bartunkova, Nikola Bartunkova was a final in Wimbledon, and Max Mrva is like 16 years old. He was best in the category worldwide when he was 15 years old. So they are like promising, guys, right? So I really enjoy it. And I also, in addition to what I do still with the businesses and sport, I teach program for the kids. It's called Unlocking Children Potential. And we basically train more than 10,000 kids already, revealing their talents and working with those talents and so on. Yeah.
So it's really interesting background, Jan, with the tennis piece, a successful business career, then getting into coaching, I guess beginning with executives, right? And now also working with athletes.
Exactly.
And I'm sure all of that, all that background informs how you work with your athletes. So I guess from a coaching perspective and more centered on athletes and tennis players, could you give us a sense of what your coaching philosophy is, and what some of the things you really want to impart to these athletes so that they can, be whatever their definition of successful is and improve?
Usually athletes are coming to me with some, challenges, right? What, are the challenges and so on. So we starting, to work on those. Then I do a diagnostic test. It's called Strengths Finder from Gallup. I work with Gallup for more than 25 years, and Jim Clifton is chairman, is a good friend of mine, to understand what is the mindset of the tennis player or athlete or a soccer player or whatever. And then I coach them on the different situation. My coaching is around 3 big pillars of the mental toughness, right? I mean, I'm like, the roots of my coaching are sitting in the positive psychology. That's why I like your podcast, guys. I was very much inspired when I was younger by people like Martin Seligman and others, right? So when I wrote my first book, I wrote like 4 books. My first book, which is international bestseller, it's called Positive Leader. And it's basically, I'm talking about the fact that the best people in the world, whether they are from the business or sport, are those who can understand who they are, who can figure out what they want from their life, and who can make decisions to use who they are to, figure out what they want, to achieve what they want. Okay. So my, mental coaching is around 3 pillars: body, breath, and the mind. Obviously, we're going always like deeply, but those are like 3 things mainly, like the body language, right breathing, different breathing techniques. I was, trained by many other people, and then the mindset, visualization, internal dialogue, how to overcome, obstacles and so on, right? I was coaching many people in the business, and people, when I joined sport, that was interesting. When I joined sport, a lot of sport coaches were saying, you are a great business guy, but you don't understand what is sport all about. And guys, brains are the same in business, brains are the same in sport. So you can use a lot of experience from business into the sport. So I was like trained here in London, 9 years ago. Now I'm the fellow at the Harvard, Coaching Institute, and there's a lot of exchange of the experience with the other coaches, right? So that's in the nutshell what I do. Usually, because my athletes are traveling around the world, I have not only Czech athletes, now I have like 6 different countries, athletes from the 6 different countries. Usually we do it, online, and it's between half an hour to, 1 hour. For example, Jiri Lehečka, the tennis player who is now top 30, before, we recorded this podcast, we had a discussion about his last tournament, what we should do in the next tournament in Stockholm, right? And he identified, I'll tell you what we do, okay? He needs to tell me what happened tennis-wise at the court, okay? I'm seeing some of the matches, and then he needs to be able to tell me what was happening with his mind. Otherwise, I'm not able to help. And it's the same with soccer players. I used to work with people like Patrick. She was the 2nd best player in Bundesliga, right? So this is it. And then we can, work together. Because for me, I'm very much inspired by people like, Buddha, obviously, even though I'm not Buddhist and I'm not, religious person. But those were like Jesus Christ, Buddha. They were really people. They were thinking about the present moment, about suffering and stuff like that. And if you are not able to forget about the last ball, you start to suffer at the court. I mean, Novak Djokovic is talking very often about that, right? So there is a lot of stuff, I believe, we can learn from the past. I'm like technologist by profession, so I'm all hands for the technology, but we should not forget that our predecessors were very smart people, right? We can learn a lot from the past.
Absolutely. No, I think that you're bringing up a good point here. So, I guess as you think about your past and you think about, your work as a technologist at, Microsoft, and your work, your past as an athlete, how does that inform the work that you do today, working with athletes, working with people in business? How does that sort of inform that philosophy that you use with them?
What I learned as an athlete, especially in the tennis, there are a couple of things you can take from tennis to the real life. Number one, you are alone. Okay. You need to decide. And that's great because people are not defined by conditions, they are defined by their decisions. That's what I believe. So you are on your own in your life. People will help you, but it's your life and you need to decide about your life. So I was always deciding on my life, number one. Number two, you play till the last ball. In soccer, if you are winning 10-0, you're probably winning. In tennis, it's not like that. So you play till the last ball, right? And then the time between the balls is as much as important as the time when you play the balls. So that's the same thing in real life. You need to have a good rest, right, to achieve some results. So, for example, I was able, a lot of people were afraid of the Bill Gates because they were saying he's tough and he's smart. I was always talking to him as an equal, In some sense, he was smarter in, coding, whatever. I was probably smarter in like opening new subsidiaries for Microsoft because I opened many of them. You know what I mean, right? Then I was really able to learn a lot how people work, how their brain works, and so on. Saying that, I was quite successful manager. I was 4 years in the row, best performing manager worldwide for Microsoft. But then, 12 years ago, I deeply failed. And I tell you why, because I made a huge mistake. I talk about time between the balls, right? But in business, I didn't do it, especially my mental energy. I was not able to renew my mental energy because my brain, physically, I was having a rest, but my brain was going like that. I was not sleeping enough and so on. So I was depressed. For 3 months, I stayed home. 3 months, I was in the mental hospital. But again, I was like, hey, should I suffer because of the past? Because I could go and say, oh, I got depression. I failed, before I was a top manager and now I'm like failure. No, I didn't say that. I said, let's learn from the past, right? That's what they call growth mindset. There's a lot of tennis players with a fixed mindset. If it's going very well, they are like, oh, that's perfect. Dopamine is going like that, right? But if it's not going well, dopamine goes down and they are giving up very easily. And if you concentrate on the process, excellence is very different thing from perfectionism. Excellence is about being best version of yourself every day. I'm telling my players every evening, go and remind yourself what was going well, remind what was going well, repair what was not going well, because we are learning mostly from mistakes. If you are making mistakes, your brain will generate like peak of the neuroadrenaline, which is saying, this is important, you need to remember it, okay? So remind, repair, and imagine how you will do it in the future, right? And this is the way, how you basically accept whatever happened in the past, accept it, move on, right? Because success is not about elevator, guys. Success is about the stairs, right? You go, sometimes. So this is it. So I really learned a lot from depression, especially after depression, because I remember everything, number one. The guy who was my, doctor, Professor Heschel, is a very good friend of mine. He was at that time president of the Psychiatric Association in Europe. So we are always talking now together what happened, he's giving me some feedback, whatever. And it's a great learning because if you are losing some important matches, like in the final of the Wimbledon, I'm not saying everybody is depressed, but you can be depressed, right? Mike Phelps, who got, 26 or 28 golden medals, he was quite often depressed after the Olympic Games, right? So, and I believe we need to train people and, you know, players in tennis, because tennis is like mental chess. Okay, it is a very tough game, and you are very close, you know, to win, and then you are losing. It's a very tough. That's number one. Number two, when I was playing, the world was what I call linear still. Changes were linear. Now changes are exponential. There's something in technology we call it Moore law. Every second year, there's a double of information is doubling. Your brain, guys, in 1 week now needs to process as much information as the brains of our predecessors 100 years ago for the whole life. So the pressure on those players is huge, huge. Social networks, there is a lot of people sending a lot of hate, you know, emails and hate messages, and so, you know, you see, so it is a tough, and I think we need to take mental health of the players. It's not only mental toughness. Now I talk even about the mental health very seriously, because it's a tough sport, you know. It's a mental sport, definitely. If you are like running marathon, it is still mental, but not that mental like tennis, right? So that's kind of in the nutshell that, you know, experience. And I'll be 62 very soon, and I still consider me to be like, you know, work in progress. I still learn a lot. I learn from your podcast a lot. As I told you, and I really mean it, you were the first podcast who went really deeply in the mental toughness topic for the tennis.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, we appreciate that, Jan. So,
you deserve it.
Your story of your depression and the things that you learned, it reminded me, and maybe this is more spur of the moment, that life is actually like a tennis match, as you said, meaning, right, that a tennis match is not over until it's over. Your life is not over until it's over. So yes, of course, at 62, you're still a work in progress. At 55, I'm still a work in progress.
You look for like 40 years old, Brian.
Your check is in the mail. Thank you. So, and I think, you know, we need to realize that. But one of the barriers that can get in the way of it, and this could be applied to your reflection exercise at the end of the day, because it's great to look at, all right, here are the things I did well. These are some of the things that maybe need work. Depends how you phrase it, because you could also be judgmental in that moment.
Oh, sure.
And I would like to get your perspective, because you also brought up Buddha and Buddhism and, you know, the concept of being non-judgmental and how important that is in a sport like tennis, in which during a match, you're losing probably almost every other point. Depending on where you are in the rankings, you're maybe 50% winning your matches. There's a lot of losing that goes on in tennis, and love to hear your take on the importance of being non-judgmental.
This is, you know, absolutely essential. Why? Because your brain is pattern recognition machine. Your brain is predicting. If, for example, Jiří Lehecka is playing with Djokovic, right? And the ball is flying. So it is, in this sense, you know, the dominant sense are obviously the eyes. There's like the photo. The photo, if it's concentrated, if he's in the present moment, photo is compared with what is sitting already in his, you know, memory. And then he plays well. If he's not concentrated, if he's, for example, still judgmental about the ball before, it's overlapping only partially, and then he's making, you know, unforced errors, whatever, right? Now, related to the Buddha, let me do it. The major question for Buddha was like how to achieve the fact not to suffer, right? And he was not fighting suffering around you. He was suffering. He was fighting suffering in you, because it is in the past, guys. Stress was basically triggered by the external events. Today, majority of the stress is happening here. It's your internal stress. That psychiatrist I named, Cyril, is telling me always that there is a less natural stress, you know, the natural danger for you, as opposed in the past. It's all created in your brain. Now, so the target was basically not to be attached to the past. And not to be attached to the past, you need to be in the present moment. Now, the question is how to be in the present moment if your mind is wandering 70% of the time. Okay. The first thing, if you wanted to manage your mind, you need to follow your mind. Okay. You need to basically study what are your, thoughts. For example, what I'm saying, to my players, if you still have some repetitive, they call it sometimes ANTs, automatic negative thoughts. If you still have some ANTs in your brain, ask 3 questions. Is it logic? Do I have any proof for it? And is it, advantageous for me to think like that? If the answer is not, it's the result of the amygdala thinking, right? Your emotional part of the brain. So in order to be in the present moment, you need to understand your thoughts, right? Why it's so important to be in the present moment? Because only in the present moment you can see reality. Because if you are judgmental, your brain is in the past. You are judging the past. You cannot judge the future. Right? You can, but so if you are in the present moment, you can see reality. If you see reality, you will figure out that everything is changing. Some balls, as you rightly said, Brian, some balls are winning. Djokovic is winning 55% of the balls. He's losing 45. Come on, he needs to be ready for that, right? So if you see that everything is changing, you are not attached to anything, and you can return back to the present moment. This is it. Non-attachment is a key. Non-judgmental. The problem is that our amygdala is 10 times faster, even more than neocortex, than the logical part of the brain. It's always like it's almost like professor against monkey, right? Professor wants you to win. Professor wants you to be successful. Professor can figure out what is true and what is not. The monkey goal is survival. Monkey does not care about your success. And if unfortunately you are still like in the last ball, then the monkey is working. So this is it. If you think like logically, the last ball which is done makes absolutely no sense for the next ball. It's logical, but majority of the players don't think logically. Still, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean, right?
Absolutely, and I think the comparison that you're making reminds me a little bit of The Inner Game of Tennis, the book The Inner Game of Tennis.
Yeah, that's a great book. By the way, in my first book, Positive Leader, Tim Galloway, we know each other, and he put some reference inside of the book. On the cover, I have a Deepak Chopra because we work a lot. When I was in Microsoft, we worked together a lot. So he's a nice guy. He's absolutely. I read Inner Game of Golf. Inner Game of Tennis was the first one. There's a lot of stuff which is still useful today. That book must be almost like 50 years old, right?
It is. I think pretty much exactly 50 years.
Next year.
And and he talks about sort of that self one and self two,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
The sort of the supercomputer, with our subconscious, and that sort of critical, self one, where we're constantly thinking, constantly criticizing, and I think also that relates to what you're saying about thinking too much about the last point, and it really isn't logical because the last point's over.
No. You need to, in your life, whatever is happening, you need to accept the past. Because if you are not accepting the past, you will build the mentality of the victim, basically. Okay. And you will start, hey, the wind is, blowing, the surface is not good, my rockets are not, ready, whatever, right? And it's in you. Anyway, you need to play Djokovic. I mean, I like Novak because he's able to beat almost everybody with like 90% of his optimal performance. You need to play with the cards you have. It's like the cards, right? Nobody is like 100% all the time, but you need to be able to win even with your like 90%. Maybe you will suffer a little bit more at the court, right? If it's not going that well, but this is it. But it's I think it's tough. And I think Rafa is also great, like in forgetting the last ball, So that's
so Josh, I don't know if you've got your full question.
I mean, I think so. I mean, I was pretty much just saying, when you were talking about sort of the monkey and the, and the opposite of that, the professor, just sort of that being, that connection to, Inner Game of Tennis and and sort of that self one and self two, the doer and more the thinker. And I think that the thinker sort of thinks back to the last point and is maybe critical
Oh
of
yeah,
that
oh
last
yeah,
point.
exactly.
And
And then it's interesting also to compare the notes with Kahneman thinking slow and fast. You know, this he is a Nobel Prize winner. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So what sort of because we on this podcast we've talked about a lot about that time in between points and what tennis players can do. What is the approach that whether it's somebody like Jerry Lehechka, a
Yeah.
top ATP player, or whether it's a junior player or somebody who's ranked lower or not at that level? What is sort of the approach that you take when it comes to that time in between points?
Yeah. Your breath and your body is always in the present moment. That's what you can use in your favor. The mind is, wandering, right? So it is about how to fix your mind to your breath or to your body. So if it's between the balls, what you can do easily, if you are like a right hand, player, you can put your racket in non-dominant, hand, which is sending signal to your brain something finish and something new will start. Okay, so it's like they call it sometimes mental jingle, like you put a mental jingle, then breathe in, breathe out, concentrate on your breath, because sometimes if you are scared, if you have fear, then you are not breathing properly, and the breathing in, breathing out, it's like putting you in the present moment. Then you can look at the center of your rocket and start to do those, rituals and push that ball, absolutely like out, right? Don't think about it. Here, I think we are like 70% right already, but there are still 30% to work on, to be honest, right? That for sure, absolutely. Because now, look, I know how to move. He was like 2.5 years ago, 650. Now he's top 30. So I have some knowledge how to do it. But to be honest with you, I don't know yet how to move him to top 10. We are learning as we go, and I think we will do it, right? Because he's hard work. He's working very hard. Because I do believe that to create like new synaptical connections and so on, it will take some time, right? And this is it. So this is between the balls, and if you change the sides, basically, right? So what I'm telling them always, one bottle, the other bottle, then again, breathe in, breathe out, couple of times. You can even do like legs release, right? Hands release, right? And you can basically push your mind to concentrate on your body and on the breathing. This is it. And then visualize the next point and go, right? I can guarantee you, if I would ask even like top 50 players what they think about during the side exchange, majority of them, they would not be able to tell me. And it's so important, right? Because you have like 1 minute, to regroup and do everything, right? I still do believe there is a great book, Power of Full Engagement, from Tony Schwartz and Jim Lohr. Tony Schwartz was teaching us in Microsoft, and I think they are absolutely right, because our predecessors, they were like hunting, having a rest, hunting, having a rest, and we need to use it, right? This is it. If you are like, if you have two very tough games, you need to have a rest, and not only physical rest, but also mental rest. The other thing, guys, I'm recommending everybody to smile, right? Whatever is happening, because you release a lot of tension. You have 70 muscles in your face. And if you smile, you have this, what they call it, there is some nerve which goes like from your head.
Vagus nerve.
Nervus vagus. And it's influencing a lot, your nervosity or your calmness, right? And if you smile, you can, manage that nerve. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the process you described for the between point routine between, right, as you called it, the balls, really gets to something we want to do with all athletes, which is helping them manage their physiology.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
right, the breathing establishes some mental coherence. It begins to turn your brain back on. You talked about tuning into the body. That's the skill of active relaxation. And then setting an intention for the next point, whether that's visualization or not, you're giving them a positive focus. So those three things not only can be practiced between points, but you can practice those off the court.
All the time. Exactly.
Right?
All the time. You are spot on. And in fact, today I was talking to Ire. I said, look, you are responsible for the game, obviously, but not for the all balls, because some balls are really, tough to play. Okay. So you need to be, control. But then you are responsible for the chemical battle on the court. And he was asking, what is the chemical battle? I said, that's all about hormones, about your body, breath, and your mind. This is it. Because your brain works like the huge chemical factory, right? You can lose, you can still feel like a winner, even though you are losing. Because look at what Djokovic, 2021 in French Open, he lost 6-0 to Rafa, and he was still walking like a lion, because it is about right hormones. Because if you are like straight, your testosterone goes up by 20%, cortisol go down by 25%. Body is very important, because the first language was not the language we talk, it was the body language. And that's why it's deeply in our subconscious. Right? So, yeah.
I think that absolutely makes sense. I know you've talked a lot about breathing, and and I know you mentioned being able to sort of breathe through different parts of your body, breathe through your legs, through your arms, and that's something, and we've talked about in terms of using progressive muscle relaxation and that sort of thing. Are there some other specific breathing techniques that you work on with players?
Yeah, I do a lot of I follow Andrew Huberman work, the neuroscientist. You probably know he's one of the best guys in the world. It's amazing. And so what I do with athletes is yoga nidra. You know yoga nidra, right? Yeah, that's a great Wim Hof, which is breathing and cold water. I was trained by Wim. Then we do breathing in the box. That's what the U.S. Navy is doing, breathing in, hold, right, and breathing out, hold. And then the technique how to make more oxygen in your blood is like following you breathing on two, like breathing in and long breathing out, right? Because the thing is that hemoglobin is distributing oxygen in your blood. And hemoglobin needs to have an optimal level of the CO2. And if you go with your breathing out, like, that's not good. And that's what a lot of athletes are doing. It needs to be like breathing out should be like 1/3 longer than breathing in. In fact, breathing out, people underestimate it's so as much as important as a breathing in, right? So you can really, I mean, if you watch small children, the babies, they are breathing properly. Absolutely. Right. By the way, that's another thing what I'm telling to some athletes who are having the babies. I'm like, watch what the babies are doing. They are always 70-80% of the time, they are in the flow, they are in the zone, they are in the present moment. That's why they learn so fast, right? They are absolutely concentrated. They are not distracted by anything, right? And they learn to walk, whatever. That's one thing. And the other thing is, what is my experience? If the athletes are having, some babies, usually they are like, okay, there are more important things in my life. It's not only tennis or football or whatever. And they are like cooling down, and it's usually a very positive impact on the game.
So let's talk perspectives, because that's where I wanted to go next anyway. And so some of what Josh and I have discussed in the podcast relates back to the theory of constructed emotions. So Lisa Feldman Barrett's who's a neuroscientist here in Boston, right? Yeah. And when we had Christina Rollo and Dave DeHaan on the podcast some time ago, they coached Victor Enescu, and they talked about their approach with Victor. And one of the perspectives that they used was that everything you do is practice. Like you're wearing a Wimbledon shirt. Even playing Wimbledon is practice. So and having that kind of perspective for some players can reduce pressure, but it can also help you process maybe a loss, maybe some disappointing aspect of things, because you have something more to look forward to. I'm really curious to, how you work with your athletes on things like perspective, how to look at difficult losses or failures, or if you even use the word failure, so that they can continue on that path of life, which, right, isn't over until it's over.
Yeah. I will give you one example, guys, but this is not from the tennis. It's from canoeing and from, fencing. I have two guys, and they both, Lucas Rohan won the silver medal in Tokyo, and Alex, who is a fencer, got bronze medal. And they were competing on Monday. And on Sunday, they were so stressed because they were afraid of the COVID test, because Japanese tests were much stronger than the European tests. Okay. So they were very stressed by that and stressed by the Olympic Games all together. So what we did, interesting exercise. We took the paper and I said, you put here the source of your stress, the source of your fear, which is like Olympic Games. And here, put like on one word, everything you achieve already in your life. Okay. And what your brain does in such circumstances, it will go from negative zoom in to the positive zoom out. Mm-hmm. My dear friend Dominic Herbati, who was number 12, on the ATP tour, he told me that when 1 year when it was not going, very well, he dropped in the ranking. He was using the word enjoy, which was like the center, and he was like, enjoy your family, enjoy your life, enjoy what you achieve already, right? Because the amygdala, the problem with your monkey with amygdala, she's fucking fast, sorry, forgive me my French. And she thinks always about the last negative experience, because amygdala wants you to survive. Amygdala doesn't want you to win, basically. And what is happening with athletes when they are like winning and suddenly it goes like, I must finish, and they are like impatient, amygdala will start like, you are like, must, and amygdala will tell you, you should not lose. And then absolutely different, hormones are released. It will start with the cortisol and you are usually losing, right? Because you need to play the game to win. And the best way to win is really play one by one ball after the other. It's logical. The past is past. You cannot change the future in the future. You can change it here and now, one point after the other. But still, amygdala is never in the present moment, by the way. She's always in the past or in the future. It's basically, amygdala is our stress, right? And the fears. And because on one side, amygdala wants you to survive. On the other hand, our biggest fear, because if you want to survive, your biggest fear is fear to die. Yeah. And the problem, I tell you what, there is an interesting point on depression. Problem with amygdala is that amygdala originally was supposed to save our life. But if you are deeply depressed, what amygdala is doing, you are not able to think logically, that's gone. And amygdala is streaming all negativity. And it's unbearable, and that's why people are committing suicide. So in fact, that part of the brain, which is supposed to, help you, it's against you, right? And that's why we have antidepressants and all the stuff, right? But this is it. So yeah, it is quite interesting. But I think what is important, number one, people should have, whether in the business or sport, they should have enough mental rest. Real mental rest, okay. And number two, if something is happening, they should go immediately visit, some professionals. That's what I didn't do. For 3 months, I was at home. And then it was so bad that, really bad.
I like that you're bringing up rest. And I know you mentioned when we were talking about breathing, you mentioned yoga nidra, non-sleep deep rest. Yeah. And also, I think for a lot of people, and maybe this was the case for you, they, whether it's in a work context, whether it's in a tennis context and other sports, but when people want to achieve a lot, they tend to really work hard at it. And that's great. And I think there's a lot of benefits to hard work, but I think that can go overboard and that can lead to burnout. And I think you bring up a really important point about rest. I wanted to go back to something that you talked about earlier, and I think it's been an important piece of what you've been saying about, being able to put the past behind you and be present, but also be able to learn from the past. And especially, with some of the life experience that you've had, how can you help athletes learn the difference between, I want to put the past behind me, but I also want to be able to learn from it. I want to be able to be present, but I also want to be able to apply some of the teachings and some of the lessons from the past. You think you could talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Look, I have a lot of learnings from Bill Gates. Bill Gates was always telling me, Jan, if you don't know whether you should do it or not, just do it. You can always ask for forgiveness. That's number one, right? So that's number one. And it is. And number two, we were always doing, like we call it debriefing, whatever. We were winning some deals, losing, always debrief. So you need to, whatever is happening, you are winning, losing. Both success and failure is leaving clues. And you need to study those clues to avoid it. Not if it's, failure, to repeat it if it's, winning, right? And there are three, in my view, there are three big questions you should ask, basically. What should I continue? What should I stop? And what should I start? I was just recently with some, Polish soccer team. They won the Liga. And the coach was asking always those, three questions after each and every match, giving them, some feedback. And this is it, right? And we should not be like, hey, I lost and it's very bad, whatever. Yeah, I think Brian said that there's a lot of losing. In a sense, tennis is sport of the losers. Out of the 120 or 64 or 32, only one will win. I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but this is it. Yeah. So you need to be ready. Tennis is, it's nice sport, but very tough. Both physical and mental.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And one of the things that I think has come up maybe more recently, and I think, Jan, you were saying how, it's become more and more difficult at the professional level, and this is true for all athletes, but it's becoming even truer for tennis players. We're hearing this in golf, is the idea of betting and gambling and its impact on players, whether that's receiving messages on social media or even, in golf. A lot of players have been talking about hearing people in the gallery betting on whether they're going to, hit the ball into the fairway or into the woods. And, I think this is, betting has become and gambling has become more accepted even by professional sports, right? They're accepting sponsorships from companies because of the money, of course, right? And so I'm curious if this is something that you're finding as a challenge with some of your players being younger and getting better, because this happens even on the ITF tour, that people will be betting, and it also has some potential mental health concerns.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a Czech player. I think she is 45 or whatever. Noskova is the name of the player. And she published 2 weeks ago, she published some harsh comments from Instagram or, whatever, really bad comments. So I was asked by CNN Prima, which is like joint venture in Czech Republic between CNN and some local television. And I said, well, number one, you can like switch off those comments, but then you are punishing also the good fans and you are losing, sponsors, right? But I think the major thing, if we talk about this part of the issue, is that we need to make sure that, social networks and including Microsoft like LinkedIn are much more transparent, okay? Because this is it. Then, betting, we should be very careful because it can be like a drugs for those, people, right? And that's why they are writing what they are, writing now. You can put, the different name there, whatever. So I think it is about education, even in the schools, what can, happen. It's like with alcohol and everything else. 1 or 2 glasses of wine is good. If you, drink 3 liters, it's not good, right? So, but what I would do, at least I would, push those companies like, but there's a very famous like Betamo and whatever in Europe to sponsor, young athletes and kids and stuff like that. And that's what they do, right? And it was always here, but when there was a paper economy, it was not visible. Now everybody can do it, and the entry level is very low. Right? So I don't have an exact answer. I think it is about education, and also like ATP, WTA, ITF. It's in their hands, whether they will work with them or not. Right? So there should be almost like some codex how people should behave, like So.
No, it's true, and I've seen like both of you were saying, I've seen a lot of ATP and WTA players who publish these things that are being sent to them, and it's horrible. And I think it's there's definitely mental health concerns linked to that, but I think that there is more that and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but I think there's more that social media companies could do, more that maybe the tours could do to prioritize that, especially now that we're in a stage where where mental health is understood better and is less stigmatized than in the past. And I think a lot of the professional tours, tennis and other professional sports are talking more about mental health, but just trying to understand the connection between betting, which has become bigger and bigger, especially in the US. I know there was a Supreme Court case that sort of opened things up a little bit, in just a few years ago, and mental health and trying to, make sure that players are being protected, because, as we all know, it's not just the Djokovic's and the Lehechkas and the top 20, top 50 players in the world here. It's, there's the vast majority of tennis players play at the ITF level, play at the, at the challenger level, futures, who are struggling to make ends meet. And they, first of all, there can be corruption, where people are maybe decide to, to take a bribe and throw a match.
I think it's exactly.
Mental health concerns. Absolutely. So I guess, just wanted to add those points, but I guess, have you seen, in your work with professional players and with junior players, what have you seen to be some of the main factors that, I guess, that have both led to different mental health concerns, but also some of the things that have helped athletes who are going through different struggles?
Yeah. No, everybody should understand that there's this discussion right now in psychology, whether there is a free choice or there is no free choice, because we are all programmed by our parents, teachers, whatever. You know what I'm talking about, right? So you are influenced by, your upbringing, right? So I think the parents are playing the key role. Okay. That's why I tell you what I do. I'm like teaching kids, but also with the kids. I mean, in our seminars, there are parents, right? And there's a very open discussion with them. And majority of the kids are like doing some sports, whatever, because sometimes parents are, too pushy, like pushing them, and they are scared to death. If I will not, it's a FOPO, right? Fear of other people opinion. No, the other people are like the parents even, right? Because the FOPO is basically, in the past, when you made some mistake and they push you out of that, group, which was hunting, you didn't survive. So we have deeply in our, mind, in subconsciousness, if I will make some mistake, I may not survive. That's why we have a, FOPO, right? So that's one thing. That the parents should be definitely, reasonable, right? Coaches should be reasonable. That's another, that's another thing, right? Very often, what is my experience? Friend of mine, she is Katerina Novotna. She won Olympic Games in cross country skiing in Italy 2006. And when she's coaching her daughter, she's like runner, right? She's running 800 meters. She's never like too pushy or whatever, right? Because she achieved something. very often the parents, which were not, athletes or whatever, are just pushing because they are almost like, hey, I have my trophy and there is another, parent, let's fight, Especially in tennis, it goes like that. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's always, but sometimes, and it's not good. So we should work with the with the parents and really explain the kids. I'm able because I'm teaching the kids from 8 years old, and I'm able. I mean, I have like soft toy monkey, and I'm able to explain them how the monkey works in the brain, right? If they have an exam, what they should do, how they should breathe, and stuff like that. We should do it because I tell you what is the issue in the childhood. We are teaching what is around them. We are not teaching them what is inside them. And we are still saying, people like Daniel Goleman and so on, that emotional intelligence is so important, like Lisa Feldman, right? That emotions are created. This is great work, but I'm even teaching at in Cell, which is one of the best business university in the world. We are not teaching even new executives, new CEOs, And unless I think self-awareness is, if you are asking me, Josh, one thing what I would do, I would build much bigger self-awareness. That's why we are testing those kids and helping them to understand who they are. Because if you understand who you are, you can figure out who are the other people, right? It can be your coach, your parents, but also your opponent. You can see, hey, right? So this is, I think self-awareness is key, and it's relatively low. You can play, it's called in tennis or in other sports, you are training type. During the training, you play like a hero, but then when you are under the mental pressure, it's not there. And I think it's because you don't understand. Because look, self-confidence starts with self-awareness. Okay, if you are self-aware, you know who you are not. Then the second point is self-confidence is about accepting the past, what happened in the past. Learn, as you Brian rightly said, learn from the past, both from the positive and negative experience. And then you are really building and this kind of, hey, there is no Nelson Mandela was saying, I will, win or I will learn. There's nothing else. And I think it's a key. If you switch hey, this is a failure. Yeah, this is a learning. We are all human beings. I could also talk about my, depression. That was a deep failure, 50 years old, and I made such huge mistake. No, I think mainly I take it as a learning, right? So people should also understand that the way they see the world, it's called paradigm, right? That paradigm can be shifted, the way you were, educated or trained or at home upbringing, it can be shifted because there is a great thing called neuroplasticity. If you change, the way you see things, the things will change, basically, right? And this is it. And the major trigger of those issues is that I believe we are not teaching enough people how mind works and so on. And it's, guys, to be honest, 90% of the stuff is on internet, on YouTube now.
Yeah. And
are you familiar with the Khan Academy? Bill Gates was, giving him some money. Saud Khan, created 15 years ago, right? It is a great tool, but still, probably 250, 300 million kids are using it, not 5 billion, right? It's on internet and it's free of charge, right?
Yeah, no, Khan Academy is a great tool for anybody who's a student.
For sure. You bet.
Yeah,
even for people with the university degree.
Yeah. So I think you're getting at an interesting point because most people, and again, we're generalizing here, their brain operates more kind of on default mode, which means, right, they focus more on weaknesses, they focus more on what's going wrong, etc. And this is why, Josh and I have talked a lot about helping athletes develop their own personal philosophy of excellence, which, giving them better ideas behind how they think. You could call that paradigms. I like to call it philosophy because I think that's cool. but
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
you call it, right?
Michael Gerros, I know him also because he worked with Microsoft. He calls it also philosophy.
Yeah, and it's really about you developing your own sort of,
Yeah.
we'll put it in Microsoft terms, you're developing your own personal operating system,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
People don't, people run applications on their computer, but they don't think so much about Windows or Mac OS. But if those things aren't working well, then a lot of stuff doesn't work well.
Oh.
And it's very much how the brain is working also. And so a big part of how we succeed is developing those better ideas behind how we think. So my question is, I think a big part of that is, what is your definition of success overall, right? I love the John Wooden definition, but I would like to hear, how you work with your athletes to help them understand maybe a healthier definition of what it means to be successful.
Yeah. And, I think the most successful athletes are those who got deep emotional connection to what they do. They play by heart. Okay, that's one. When I was working with Bill Gates, almost for 10 years, traveling, whatever, that was a great laboratory to study relationship between success and happiness. Okay, because I think happiness is a little bit, more than the success. And I think the happier people are those who can make happy other people through something they love. Okay. Which means we are going, if, what you do, it's like the meaning of your, life, right? Then that success, it's continuous. There is another great guy who used to teach positive psychology at Harvard, Tal Ben-Shahar, right? He wrote the book Happier. Happiness is not one point, but happiness is the way, basically. That's what the Chinese were saying. So the tool I'm using with athletes, but also with the business, people, and it's published in the Positive Leader book, 3 circles. First circle, your genes. Those are your talents, basically. Those are the talents. You can figure out Gallup test or, do another test, whatever. So your, talents. Then the activities you really like. It's almost like those are your talents. There is a metrics. The activities you like, those are activities which, provided you are using your talents, are putting you in the zone, in the flow. Okay? So, but this is still about you. This is not yet about the other people. The third circle, it's about the other people. And that's the circle of your personal values. Because your personal values are reflecting things what you like with the other people, because we are social beings, right? So if you take like 5 people you admire, one thing per each and every person, those are your personal values. And when those 3 circles are overlapping, this is the meaning in your life. My meaning is unlocking human potential. That's a huge meaning. And I use it both like in the business sense, in the sport sense, and everything. And I really, mean it, right? I think success, I think who is saying that? Some great speaker is saying always that success without the fulfillment is failure. And that's what I think it is. You need to be fulfilled. It needs to be like the meaning in your life. It means basically, if you are winning Wimbledon, it needs to be something more than just this, nice cup, right? Because I think Novak Djokovic, tennis is like meaning. He likes tennis so much, the same with Federer, Nadal, right? So this is it. I think meaning, again, right? 2 great books, Viktor Frankl, The Man's Search for Meaning, that you can serve. If you have a meaning in your life, you can survive everything. And then the gentleman who was teaching us, unfortunately, he passed away, Clay Christensen from Harvard, wrote a book, How Will You Measure Your Life? Those are 2 great books which really influence, me personally, how I was thinking about the meaning in your life. I think meaning is super important, Also, like for longevity, if you have a meaning, you don't want to retire.
Yeah. I mean, I think that gets back to your mention of Martin Seligman, and his model of PERMA.
Exactly.
But how you measure it is important, because not everybody has a great definition of success. Many, especially in a capitalist society, will measure by the size of their bank account. Others might measure it simply by wins, and those are not necessarily going to lead to meaning and fulfillment, and which I think is an important reason to work on that concept with athletes so that they can process it better.
And Brian, I think it's nothing bad to have a lot of money or
absolutely
grand slams, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
But you need to enjoy it. I think the key word is enjoy. Right? You need to like it. I mean, because look, Andre Agassi, majority of his career, he hated tennis.
Yeah.
Right. You read his book. It's amazing how he was open and honest. But then it changed because he took it like, hey, I need, to play because I built this nice, school for the less fortunate kids and so on. Then Steffi came, obviously, that helped also.
Yeah, so purpose was added on. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
No, I think I like that this discussion has gone in that direction in terms of purpose, because I think it gives people that reason why they do what they do. And if we're working so hard at it, we're dedicating so many hours to it, and there's those ups and downs. As we talked about, there's those ups and downs within a match, and ups and downs within a career, right? We win matches, we lose matches, we win finals, lose them, whatever. And I think that purpose is critical. So as we start to maybe tie some of these different pieces together, what is maybe one key tip that you can give people in terms of finding their purpose or finding sort of their reason why they do what they do?
Okay. Well, they should figure out, first of all, the nature. What are the talents? What are the hormones? What are the genes? Okay. And you can do some tests, or you can do another thing. You can put together some activities you really like, and those activities should give you energy. If it's talent, right, it should give you energy. You should learn fast. Okay. You should do it intuitively because it's your genes. You should improve as you go. You should improve because talent is putting you a lot in the flow, and in the flow, according to the study from McKinsey, we are learning 450% faster. That's why if the athletes are able to even train in the flow, we call it in sport obviously zone, and it's better. And last but not least, when you finish that work, that activity, you are looking forward to do it again and again and again. Okay. The funny thing is, what is happening with, so you have some of those activities, and you're using them in a different fields, right? The funny thing with the flow is that if you are in the flow, one of the first hormones which is released, it's endorphin, and endorphin is 100 times stronger than morphine. This is why you keep going. This is why if the player really feels like, hey, it's really I play by my heart. This is what Nadal is doing. Nadal is losing sometimes 2-0 in the final of Australian Open with Medvedev. I think it was a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly. And then he's still winning because it's endorphin battle, right? So this is it. That's number one. Then the number two, what I would say is that people should go like really build this growth mindset, like every day better version of me. Because sometimes people go and like, I wanted to learn some foreign language, okay, at the beginning of January, but then it's gone unless you really create a process goals, like to build some knowledge of the foreign language. That means like 3 times to the language school every day. I will learn 5 new words and so on. That's why dopamine is released, and it goes like, dopamine is reward hormone. Dopamine is like rewarding you for the progress, but dopamine is motivating you to continue. And the dopamine is very important hormone for us, right? So that's what I would say. And then that you can do that exercise, talents, the activities you like, and what are your, personal values, and start to think like that. What is really majority of the time, those things are giving you, energy, and you can do it for a very long time. Kids, they know exactly what is putting them in the flow. They play with some toys. Sometimes they are throwing them in the corner, you know.
So that's probably a great way to wrap this up, is helping people discover their purpose, right? So thank you, Jan. What are ways that people can connect with you on social media, your website, et cetera? How can people connect with your work and what you're doing?
Yeah, I have a website, janmuhlfeit.com. That's both in my native language, Czech, and obviously in English. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on the YouTube channel, there is probably like 70% in Czech, 30% in English. So there's a lot of stuff. I have a colleague in Switzerland. We do every second week some live sessions, so there's a lot of stuff. And then the books, the first book, Positive Leaders, like in 12 different languages. And now they are which is translating, and it will be published by the Winley, by the US, publisher. It's a book, Unlocking Children Potential. What we were talking about, like it's a lot of use by it should be on the shelves in February next year. It's a lot about like what parents should do with the kids and coaches and teachers, and so I think it's a really good book.
Yeah, no, it sounds absolutely fascinating, and looking forward to that coming out next year. So, Jan, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really very good and interesting conversation, and I know both of us enjoyed it.
No, Josh and Brian, thanks very much, and thank you for what you do, both for the tennis players and for the overall sport. And I really enjoy what you do in terms of the mental toughness and mental health. In fact, what we talk about today, because I think those topics are really important. Thank you again.
Well, that was an awesome conversation with Jan. I would say for me, one of my biggest takeaways, or maybe a highlight of the conversation, was when we talked about two different ideas that I think are very connected. One is when talking about the past and talking about how we need to be able to learn from the past. And he talked about, some of his personal experiences, and he talked about, his experience with depression and how, how he connected that to, being able to learn from our experiences. And I think it's interesting to think about how that connects to this idea of being able to, really the necessity of being able to put things behind us, being able to put the past behind us so that we can stay present. So I think it was really interesting just hearing him talk about this idea of both, learning from the past, but also being able to put it behind us so that we can be present and that we can, really be in this moment, not stuck in the past and whatever has already happened. Because I think I think this can be true both in the micro and in the macro, right? In a tennis match, if we double faulted or we, missed an easy volley and we're not able to put that behind us, then that impacts the next point, and that impacts the present. And I think that's also true in life, right? Whatever's happened in the past, whether those are failures, whether those are perceived as failures, whether those are mistakes, whether, it's bad luck, whatever it is, if we're not able to put those things behind us and learn from them, but also, be able to put it behind us and move on, then we're not able to fully be engaged and present in this moment. So I really like that idea, and I think it's applicable both in tennis, but also beyond in life. So really enjoyed that aspect of the conversation.
And I think that connects well, Josh, with the idea that we discussed on being non-judgmental, and then Jan brought up the idea of not being attached to things. So it's always a tricky balance, though, of like learning from the past but not judging it. And there takes some, I think, skill and practice in how to do that. And that's why working with someone like Jan or a mental coach is helpful, because that person can bring some perspective about how do we talk about the past? How do we talk about what happened physically? How do we talk about what you are processing mentally and emotionally? So that you can get to a place where the past is not a thing of judging whether it was good or bad or a failure. Rather, it is a step forward, and how we learn from that and we discussed there how life is a lot like a tennis match. A tennis match is not over till it's over. Well, life isn't either. And so, all of us are that work in progress, and we're not condemned necessarily by things we've done in our past. We can always somehow choose better, choose to be better, and move forward. So I thought it was, I thought it was really interesting conversation. We went in a lot of different directions on things, but it was, in the end, it was really cool. How we got to that purpose piece. And I think he's a fascinating guy, and I'm sure he's doing a lot of great work with some of the athletes that he's working with. And, they're lucky to have him in their lives. So we want to thank Jan again for coming on the show, and we want to thank all of you for listening. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for me and Josh, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the content that Josh and I discuss on the show, please rate and review the podcast so other tennis enthusiasts can find it more easily. Additionally, to be notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube. You can also check us out on Instagram. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership, where you can learn about the benefits of being part of the Tennis IQ podcast community. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.